Okay, so what have I been doing today? So actually, some of this is from last night, but I talked a little bit about movement, and I implemented a super basic movement system last night. And then after the video, I worked a little bit longer, and I kind of wanted to incorporate the idea of like wall jumps, right? And like, so one thing you're gonna notice right now is this jump feels super floaty. The movement left and right is super abrupt, and then another issue is that it doesn't interact well with slopes. Right, so this is just a left input. As soon as I drop it, the character jumps and then slowly slides down the slope the same way that they do on walls, right? Just at a slightly different speed because of the interaction with gravity. So, wasn't really too sure how to combat this, and after a little bit of research and YouTube watching, I found out that part of this is because of the way that Unity's built-in physics, which is rigid body 2D, just interacts with slopes and with like moving platforms. And there are ways around it, but they're really complicated, over the top, clunky. So what I ended up opting to do instead was do like a raycasting strategy, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But the things that I implemented were, so first, there's a double jump on the wall, right? And you can jump from wall to wall, and right now there's like no limit on it, but basically it's just a jump that has less height on it to basically force the user to jump from wall to wall to maintain how far they've gotten, right? And then I also just did testing on slopes, and I didn't like it very much, so we moved a little bit. We moved the system, revamped the system. And okay, so let me show you the that was a idea that I had for like a game. And like the name. Oh, I opened the wrong one. No, stop opening. Oh, this will be a little while. Okay, let's talk a little about like ray casting. So basically, the idea behind ray casting is that did it open? Yeah, it opened. Let's close that. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the idea behind ray casting, first of all, is that an object will cast rays out from a certain side in a certain direction, and when the ray hits an object, it detects a collision, and now the object knows where the space is, and effectively with some calculations you are able to detect collision using the collision of those rays that aren't actually shown in the game but are calculated in the engine. And what this allows is you basically develop your own quote-unquote physics. You develop your own gravity, your own movement speed, you can add friction if you want, slipperiness, like you basically make it all yourself. And it's not really that hard, but it's a lot smoother, and it feels a lot more customizable. So I haven't implemented wall jumping yet, but I just wanted to show what I have with raycasting. So this is the next one, and first of all, this jump feels nicer, although I won't necessarily attribute that to raycasting because I'm sure I could have achieved a jump like this tinkering around with rigid body 2D. But this jump feels super nice, right? And I've added collision, even though collision normally isn't there by default with raycasting. You have to actually make it, unlike rigid body 2D. So there's collision. And then there's left and right collision as well, because the way that left and right collision works is that basically on this obstacle there are going to be rays cast out towards the right side, and the rays will basically detect the collision when it happens like this. You see these like small, like, here, let me see. You see this red line? That's a ray, and there's something called skin width, I think is what it's called, which is basically that the detector starts inside, and I don't remember the exact reasoning for it, but I believe it was to make like detection a little bit more accurate, so that you could start, like you could have a ray start inside so that it wouldn't just spawn and instantly have a collision and then keep on running the same input. Basically, like it's like a buffer, from my understanding. So I implemented that, I implemented this, and then the really cool thing that I like is this. Look, it interacts with slopes way better. And now what I can basically do is, like right now, there are generally two states that the user's in at any time, where they're touching an object and when they're touching the ground at the same time, or like, sorry, when their when their movement is up and down or left and right, And normally, right now, the only time that it will be in like horizontal and vertical direction at the same time is when they're moving through air, right? Which basically means that the trigger for having something below you using the raycasters, you can trigger that, you can tell that, isn't triggered. Which then, this is kind of just brainstorming because I'm not really 100% sure. I'm figuring this out as I go along, following different tutorials, learning different things. So I'm kind of just brainstorming and learning, watching other people do it, implementing it into my own code, etc. So what I would think is that now I would be in a scenario where if there's vertical and horizontal movement and the condition for having the ground below you is met, then you would be able to tell that, oh, the user's on a slope, right? And then you could say that, oh, well, if the overall vertical velocity is negative, i.e. the character is going down, then you would enter like a slide animation, right? And then because like right now it wouldn't enter a slide animation when it's going downwards to the left in the air, and the reason why is because it doesn't have the trigger for the ground being below it. So that's kind of the idea right now. I also want to add like wall jumping and stuff like that, but then I think after I get the movement system down, because right now this doesn't feel that great either. I think part of it is just like not having a sprite, but there's one kind of error right now, which is like this slope will only jump when the character is moving to the left. So like if I'm holding down right here until it leaves the slope, it won't let you jump. So I have to figure that out. So yeah, but that's the next step. And then after the movement system, I'll probably start trying to implement some sprites. I'll probably just use some free sprite pack online. What else do I want to do? I pulled up this idea earlier, but the kind of idea is that I wanted to make like a roguelike. So again, I've talked about being inspired by Dead Cells. I wanted to make a roguelike, and the kind of gimmick of it, the thing that makes it different from other ones, is that you don't really have to engage in the combat yourself. You can collect the souls or kind of like spirits of the enemies you defeat, just like random like trash mobs, and you can either consume them, and you augment your stats. Maybe you have like an upgrade point system that builds up to power-ups, or you actually have power-ups, or maybe they're like a consumable that'll buff your ability to play, or like your just movement speed, your damage, your HP, whatever. Or you can use them and you can summon them like a necromancer, and have them fight for you in your stead. And then in that case you would use the original monster script, and then you do a little bit with targeting, probably change the sprite a little bit. But then the idea is that you could have a couple of different play styles. One that was like a hybrid play style where you use your mobs to tank for you and you fight alongside them, or one where you're completely like a glass cannon where your mobs just fight for you, or one where you're the fighter yourself and everything that you destroy just goes towards augmenting your stats. I feel like it may be a little bit complicated for my very first game idea though. I mean, I've made other ones, but I would say that none of them have been like actual delves or deep dives into learning how games work, Unity works, etc. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for now. I have to go in 3 minutes, so unfortunately I'm not really going to be talking about much other than what I did. And I was kind of thinking, I talked to one of my friends and I was like, it might be really interesting if I could just use these devlogs as talk pieces too, where I can talk about my thoughts on different concepts. For instance, like yesterday I talked about movement in battle royales and how you can use the concept of movement in battle royales and like user experience to kind of determine what makes movement in games in general satisfying or unsatisfying. Kind of want to talk more about stuff like that because I love sharing those ideas and vocalizing them. But for now, I gotta go. Thank you.